make sure everything is up and running and on for everyone today. There we are. Sorry, had to do the simulcasting. As anyone may know, that our live show is always simulcasted on Facebook, multiple pages and locations therein, as well as Twitter and also LinkedIn and also YouTube. But more importantly, we're actually on TV. We are on your Roku, and we're on Apple TV, we're on Amazon Prime Video, and we are also on Google TV. Just simply look for Hospitality Channel. So with that in mind, thank you and welcome everybody. Our topic today, in keeping with our theme that we started just this past September, beginning of the month, even though we've been doing this now in our 8th year every week, we decided to change format to being a single topic, single hour. And we've been keeping true to that, and I've been taking the joy of doing that right now without having other co-hosts for me at the time, as we begin to plot and organize our scheduling as time comes forward. And today's topic is how to create a comp set, a digital comp set. What makes this unique in comparison to what more hotels are traditionally familiar with, in the sense of comp sets being competitive set or or businesses whom you compete with, is digital is it's not the same. And let me explain a little bit as to why it's not the same. Comp sets have a lot of purpose to them, and unfortunately, unfortunately, an aspect of it is finance. Ownerships, management groups, asset management corps, REITs, brands. There's a lot of people that are engaged in the process of owning and operating hotels. From that, they're not engaged with the hotel itself. A lot of times, especially with REITs and things like that, they're associated with it as an investment value. Just, I spent this much money for this business. This happens to be a hotel business compared to a quickie mart or a apartment complex or a retail outlet or commercial space or whatever. This is an investment for me. And so comp sets are created to determine how well my business is doing, other than the metrics of finance. Meaning finance, everyone can look at they look at a P&L and say, well, how much money have we been spending? How did I spend? Okay. And how is it efficiently running business? And how much of the flow through from top line revenue makes it to bottom line, which is the check that the ownership receives. Comp sets is another evaluative way of determining how you are positioned and performing within your market. The most famous platform associated with competitive sets is the Smith Travel Research Report, or STAR Report. Smith Travel Research Report was created by many years ago. 20 plus years ago, really. I think almost 30. That I don't know. I have to go actually look. That's an interesting trivia question, I guess. To allow hotels to anonymously compare themselves to other hotels. You could select who you want to be compared against, so that you could say, I'm in this destination or this market, and these are the brick and mortar hotels in my market that people that would stay with me would stay with there as well. Usually the strategy associated with defining a comp set market, before revenue managers even existed, was the evaluative process of comparative asset. How many rooms compared to how many rooms? Level of service, amount of amenities, draw a proposition as to why you built the hotel well you did. If you built an airport by a hotel by an airport, you'd want to be compared to other airport hotels because you're pursuing the same market just as much as if you were downtown. As to as if you were a mid-scale hotel, you'd want to be compared to other mid-scale hotels. Comparing yourself artificially to other hotels that aren't hotels that are truly competitive to you, at the time did not seem like a rationale that was worth considering. Why compare yourself to a Four Seasons hotel, brand specific, when you're a Best Western? It just doesn't work. Even though you're in the same market and you have rooms and they have rooms, inventory and market, the market that you're catering to, selling to, is definitively driven by the amount of money they're willing to spend to stay with you. So it didn't make rational sense. Unfortunately, over time, comp sets using STAR reports, and I think Calibra has theirs now. I'm not a big fan, but oh well. It is another resource. Have been used for a variety of reasons. People quickly learned that they could create comp sets that made them look better than they really were, because they could shine better than other hotels that were not as good as them, or as prolific in their selling ability, or the type of product that they were able to sell to drive more business to themselves compared to them. A hotel that didn't have meeting space or whatever was unfairly compared to a hotel that did, And then the revenue generated from that type of market segment demand allowed you to artificially look better than what you were, which was a great little run into your boss's or teacher's office and go, hey, look, we're doing so good. And that's how it got used, unfortunately. Other ways of doing it were financial comp set considerations. How can we compare to other places so that we show that we need more capital expense or more FF&E investment into the property? We would artificially do the reverse, which is share against a comp set that we didn't shine well against to show that we could do better if we were to upgrade our product. So it got to being a leverageable tool. It has its values in all those circumstances, except for one that it loses, and that is market information, market insight. The idea of competitive set analysis is to determine how your performance is to those of your peers, metaphorically. And so from that, you know whether or not, like a pace car in a race and or a pace person in a foot race, how well are you doing against the best time or the lead time, above or below the mark, so to speak. And so competitive set analysis for marketing has a higher value for being more about what you are in comparison exactly to those that you are truly competing against. And this is where it gets a little different than just brick and mortar competitive sets in your market. Hotels now globally compete globally with other hotels and destinations. Let me explain on that a little bit. When you are in consideration for where somebody's going to stay in your market, the traditional competitive set of your in-market competitors is more realistic. I've decided I'm going to XYZ location. I'm looking at the hotels that are available in XYZ location based on what I'm willing to spend. And that puts me against these hotels, these 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 hotels that have relatively the same price point, relatively the same amenities, relatively the same general information I find valuable, whatever my purchase selection is. And for that reason, I'm comparing them against each other. That is an in-market competitive set. A digital competitive set is about a little farther back in the funnel of discovery and education. And that is, I'm thinking about going to ABC destination versus XYZ location. Let me look at both to see what might be something that would drive me to make a choice. Quality of hotels, quality of events, quality of amenities, quality of things to do, ease of getting there. Remember, travel, flying and getting there, it's a real pain to get to there, but really easy to get there. Well, that might be a differentiator for you to make that choice there compared to there. We can't ascertain that from our perspective of providing this product and service, but we can begin to evaluate where those decisions get made and how we compare against them. Hence, digital competitive set. So digital competitive sets have a lot more parts to it than just the direct competitor in the market, the person across the street, metaphorically. A lot of it has what's called symbiotic market comparisons. And that is, and let me give you an example of this. There were hotels I was responsible for in the Florida Keys. Beautiful place, absolutely pristine. I highly recommend going there. Truly an enjoyable place. We found that our strongest on-market line competitor was not necessarily the hotel up the road or the hotel across the street or the resort. It was Aspen, Colorado, Vail, Colorado, Flagstaff, Arizona, Canada, Banff, Whistler, the Caribbean, yes, of course, because we're comparing those. But what we found very much so was we were comparing in competitive set terms demographics. Demographically, we had a group of people that had the other components necessary to make this type and level of decision, the income and the ability and the desire to say, do I want to have a beach vacation or time, or do I want to have a ski mountain lodge vacation time? And they were choosing and comparing not on our proximity to each other, but in our comparisons of what we were offering. And that kind of digital competitive set can only be determined by how you show up in comparison to those that are also trying to show up for those people. And I'll explain that as we go through the methodology. I will be referring to some tools and platforms. Please understand I'm not endorsing these. Well, I am tertiarily because I use them and I wouldn't use them if I didn't find value to them. But I don't derive benefit from them. There's no sponsorships. We never do sponsorships for this show. And there's no affiliations or, you buy this, I get 10. There's nothing of that. The only time I've ever done that is I think with AppSumo when I was telling you, hey, if you want to use this code, you can, because I'll get $10 for if you sign up for it because you liked it or something. I'm not even talking about those today. So we're just going to use tools to explain a little bit how they get used to determine competitive set. So we talk about digital competitive set with just that additional component of symbiotic markets that we compare against. And we have to define the parameters that are used to determine who they are. I mean, you just don't walk in and go, well, if I search for myself, what comes up? It's basically you're walking into an open field with bales of hay all over the field, and you're going to have to go over and find each and every one of them for that one little needle you're looking for. You could be lucky and hit it in the first one, or you could be unlucky and wait until the last one and find it in the last place you looked. That is not a rational way of researching digital competitive set. We talked about this in our SEO optimization live show. What you first need to do in evaluating yourself in your competitive set on market is to first determine who you are. What are your assets? What is your authority? What is your value proposition? Now, traditionally in hotels, that's been done with what's called a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It is a perennial annual rite of passage budget program in which you should go and evaluate your property specifically in the categories of everything that you represent and itemize exactly what you have down to square footage of space, amount of seating capacities based on configurations in your meeting spaces, total capacity in your restaurant, types of restaurants, type of menus, diversity of menu, diversity of food service operations, number of rooms, types of rooms, variations of rooms, ease and convenience of getting to markets that you feed, market strata that you feed, and incomes that you need to go over and reach for people to stay with you. There is a need of income if you're going to spend $500 a night at your hotel, that you have to have an income level. Or by the same token, if you have multiple room configurations or multi-room suites and so forth, the family component, all these things get broken down into your strengths, your weaknesses, what don't you have, opportunities, how do you compare against those in your market that you have that they don't, and threats, what do they have that you don't? That's it. That's your SWOT analysis. That's a key component of being done before you then do what we're talking about, which is your evaluative asset authority value online. And what I mean by this is the research of what you begin to show up for. Here's the reality of our world, and we are a digital world. When I first started this back in the early 2000s, from a marketing perspective, running hotels was before all of that and everything, it was a simpler time. We represented a fraction of the industry, 3, 4, 5%. It was like, whoa, this is crazy that we even that's a lot of business, and people were just barely paying attention to digital marketing. Search engine results, people using the internet. But really, at the time, most people were looking for the more traditional ways of discovery of hotels. And we've went through this in stories before where people would go over and research via Chamber of Commerce and libraries what hotel existed where. They used brand a lot in the sense of reaching out from their hotel, what other hotels they were connected to in other locations. And you relied upon brand. And this wasn't necessarily web driven at the time. This was a matter of collaborating with Marriott, calling up Marriott, saying, hi, Marriott, I want to go to this town. Do you have a hotel there? Yes. Oh, great. Well, I have a Marriott reward member. And there's a value proposition associated with that loyalty or that connectivity to the brand. That's gone at this point. Sorry, the detriment of being the one person talking is that when you drink coffee, you can't do the same thing. Not a ventriloquist yet. So from a digital marketing perspective, you have to first quantify what you show up for in our digital community. That's our world now. A phrase that a lot of people hear, and I'm sorry if it's lesser, you already know this, SERPs, search engine result pages. People use search engines, Google being the beast in the room, primarily, but Bing is used. Others are used, but mostly, predominantly, in most every category, Google is the de facto place. And so how you show up for how people search is a very critical component to the success of your discoverability for somebody to even have you into their consideration phase. Okay. How they search has been a constant growth for Google, how well they can understand the usage of what used to be keywords. Keywords were very simple. If a word was used, Google used that to determine what they were going to show you in results. That has since changed. It's gotten much more robust because people would, as marketers do, try to figure out ways to distort that to their advantage. And so Google got better at trying to understand not just the words you used, but how you intended them to be used for. The intent was the big issue. And Google, without getting all technical and geeky, has figured out slowly over time how to apply the value of the word prior and after, and then combined in a phrase to understand what your intent was by using the search. Because not everybody asks the same question, even though they may be looking for the same information. And you figure the numbers and metrics that Google uses, they've been quick to figure out how to make those variations so that the results are the most applicable to what you're looking for. And they've gotten so good at it that they dominate the results that they provide with most of their information. If you look at the top of any results page, it's mainly Google stuff before it ever gets to the part where we pay for it to be there. And then below all that is the organic part. We had that conversation last week in last week's show on SEO. So digitally, we have to determine what people are using to discover us that we actually show up for. And that's the keyword research we talked about in SEO last week. And then we talked about how those words get used into phrases by creating clusters, taking those words and creating the similarities between those words, between families versus destination information versus amenities and so forth, and creating keyword clusters that are related to each other. And from that, we create a content overlay. Well, all of that is very parallel to your SWOT analysis information. A lot of what your SWOT analysis has created is the context of what you're searching for to see how well you search up for. Once you've determined your strengths, you research your strengths on your search engine results. And I don't mean by needle in the haystack. We're going to talk about tools to use this for, to determine how well you represent yourself for what truly you are. The fact that you do have the meeting space you do have, the rooms you do have, the location you have. How well do you show up and who else shows up for you is what we're discussing today about comp sets and creation of those. Just because you're really good and feel that you're really good about a product and that you really should show up well for it doesn't mean you are, because if you haven't optimized yourself from the discussions we had with SEO, you don't show up for it. Even though you may be all that and more, Google doesn't know that well enough or doesn't authenticate you well enough to actually show you in that light that you think you should be in. And from that, and they will always give results, who does show up? Who is doing it right? How well do they show up for what you should be showing up for is the method of this comp set discovery. So you go through this cluster, you go through this content brief, you create a content that you feel is more applicable to you, and how do you show up for that content? You determine your rank and scale. Now, there's a lot of tools that help you with this process. There's platforms like Moz, M-O-Z, where you can research what you are showing up for and why. And this gets very technical and geeky as to what you use for headline text and whether you have optimization, you have schema. We talked about that last week, how well you show up for all these things. And also, then as you discover this, you can see who else is showing up in comparison to you. And now there's the other value of these tools, and that is the same research you did for yourself, you do for your competitive set. The same level that you look at yourself in granularity of what I am showing up for, my business is showing up for, you apply the same tools to your competitors as to what do they show up for and how well do they show up and why are they showing up at the level that they are. So you are creating a competitive review, a SWOT analysis of your competitors as they are displayed for what you should be showing up for yourself. It is a awakening process for a lot of people to realize how poorly they are represented in digital medium spaces for what they truly are, and how well somebody that isn't as good as them has taken their voice, and that's a legitimate term we'll talk about, their voice in market about what they truly are for themselves. So taking some tools, the first evaluative process, the best evaluative process is to granularly look at your website. Now, if you're a brand hotel, you have very limited resources for this because the brand mothership does this for themselves. It's pursuing those questions with brand and asking how well you rank up. These tools work for using that. You can take your mothership website, which is, Marriott.com/blah, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And put it into these tools and it will say whether it knows of direct traffic to it, whether there's information related to it. It won't do the actual website analysis as to how well you rank for tagging and so forth, because it's hidden behind Marriott's cloak and dagger of how they run their website. A lot of script blocking and stuff. And again, not to get technical geeky about that, but it blocks a lot of the ability for those to be discerned. What you're looking for is how well those that are showing up for what you should be showing up in your market. And that comes to using tools like, and I'll refer to this one called SERP SERP stat, search engine result pages stat.com. This is a great value process. And this now goes back to the conversation about having your own website, of taking the domain that you have and putting it into this platform. And first off, it'll tell you what words you are ranked for and or showing and what rank that is. They give you a wonderful statistic review as to how you positioned, what you're positioned for, what words you show up for, what phrases you show up for, whatever. It'll also give you suggested competitors in that space as to who's showing up better than you or as the same as you. This is where it gets a little skewy that you have to begin to filter, and this is industry related, and I'll get to that in just a second as I drink coffee. They'll show you your strongest competitors by suggestion. And there's the competitors you can't really do much about. And that is TripAdvisor, Expedia, Hotel.com, brand itself, maybe if you're a branded hotel. And the reason why you can't do much about those is their optimization in relationship to yours is based on more than just the individual content of your hotel. It's also based on the authority that they have, not only about your hotel, but everything around your hotel in multiple contexts, the amenities and locations and information and so forth about everything around your hotel as well. And Google has decided, because of that vast amount of information that they have on their website about all that, that they rank higher than you for yourself. Can't influence that too much. What you then do with a tool like SERPstat is that you begin to define who you want to be compared to. So we're going to pause that right now because we haven't determined that yet. We only want to see how we ranked for what we ranked for. And then we ask the platform, and so who does that compare us to? And it's going to give us these, like I said, TripAdvisor and so forth. And we're like, okay, of course they're going to dominate us. They have 20, 30, 50, 100 times more the content about us and what's surrounding us. So they dominate the authority associated with looking for us. So you can't be that right now. There are sneaky ways of improving it, but that's an advanced conversation. And frankly, that's what I get paid for. So anyways, with that, we now need to go and look and see who on a smaller scale is stealing our thunder, taking our voice in market. Who are we being compared to? First step is for what we should show up for ourselves. So this goes first to taking the terms that we've discovered that we should show up for, that this platform, like a SERPstat and others, has said that we rank for, and taking those same phrases and terms and putting them into a platform like iSpionage or SpyFu, and saying, if I put this in, who shows up? And you can do this as Google search. It's a little randomized because we all have tailored results based on our search history. So it does give us a skewed view. So if you're going to do any of this stuff, do it incognito if you use Google Chrome or DuckDuckGo or something like this, so that you don't get the skewed results based on your previous search histories. Just to see how that pops up in general search, I wouldn't use that as a search tool, really and honestly, because you are looking for a needle in a haystack. Platforms aggregate data, and they do it from VPNs, virtual private networks, so that they can do it as neutrally as possible or as unbiasedly as possible in the results that they're searching for. And choosing VPNs and the locations will at least just minimize the skewing to being that geographic searching to other areas, which is a key influencer. So, anywho, you would take these platforms like Espionage, SpyFu, and you would put in what you should be showing up for and seeing who else shows up according to these platforms. And they'll start showing you, and you keep track of this. It's literally a log. You can screen grab it. You can Google Sheet it. You can rip it and pull it over. You can just list it. But you're going to begin to see familiarities because, remember, you're more intimate with your market than you may be aware of. And you may see very quickly that it's just not the hotels in your market that are showing up for these things. Obviously, when you start putting location and so forth, you're going to get more of the hotels that you're directly competing with in market. But above that, without the location to it, where you're looking at, beachfront resort or a mountain view resort or downtown metro urban or whatever, you're going to start seeing other markets show up in this competitive update reviews from platforms like this that are going to start showing you that gee, there seems to be a lot of hotels in downtown Cincinnati that are comparing themselves to my downtown Detroit hotel. What are they doing? And so then that gives you a breadcrumb. Let's take those domains that are showing up well for the terms that you were told from another platform like SERPstat or Moz that you should show up for, and see why they show up well. Why do they show up? And this isn't to compare what they're doing to take business from you. This is now a research aspect of what are they doing well that I can adopt. Because if they're showing up well for what they're doing in the generalized search of downtown hotel, they've done it so well, they show up that farther up in the discovery of not downtown hotel Cincinnati, but downtown hotel. Wow. Why did they show up for such a high level term so well when I can't even show up for downtown hotel Detroit? Learning from your competitors is the key element to this, not just taking their business, but learning from your competitors is a key component of this. So seeing what they did, or did they by looking at how did they structure their website? How did they create content that Google was found relevant enough to give them the award of being able to show up for that term is really what you begin to track these domains for. Looking at them and saying how and why did they show up so well? That's one component. The other list that you're keeping track of is the hotels that are taking over the traffic that should be coming to you, but they're intercepting it. And that goes to my symbiotic market discussion. Why is it that Cincinnati is pushing hard for downtown conference hotels Midwest, and yet I'm doing the same thing for my Detroit hotel and I'm not getting the traffic that apparently they are? What is it about them? Now, that's when you go into your brick and mortar comparisons of, wow, do they have newer content, a newer space? They have bigger conference space? Is it juxtaposition? What you do the SWOT analysis. What is the opportunities that this hotel has in comparison to you? It might be sitting right next to the conference center. It might be sitting right next to the airport. And you go, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I can't beat that. I can't beat that. They're there right next to that. I can't do that because I'm not right next to mine in my market. Those now are dismissive. Like I can't fight that aspect, so I shouldn't feature it or promote it. I can't steal that concept from this. But the hotels that you do compete with, like, why is the hotel just outside of my radius? I'm over by the airport and I'm driving airport traffic, let's say. But this hotel shows up better for a hotel to stay at as an airport hotel. But I know it's farther away from my airport than me, but they're getting my business. Why? And that becomes into this analysis, your comp set analysis. You may see that technologically they have better content about traveling through the airport that you are nearby. And that means that a lesson learned for you, you need to expand your content associated with transportation requirements and facilities, and you need to enhance your content about proximity to the airport, your shuttle, whatever. By the same token, other influences have come into our market that didn't exist years before as much, but they influence how we show up. And that is, they might have really good reviews, better reviews actually than yours. And because they have better reviews, Google weighs that in their algorithm. You see that term an awful lot, which is a mathematical calculation of how do they prioritize one versus another. And they take a lot of criteria in that discussion to determine how well they think your content compares to somebody else's content when it's asimilar. And so reviews have a very strong influence. If your reviews are less positive than their hotel reviews and the content is similar to your content, it negates the distance issue because it augments it with a better review score. And the higher the score, and this has been studied many, many times in many, many ways, 1 star can create a huge new increase in ADR and occupancy simply because the perception, valid as it may be, of value to the hotel goes up because people feel they're getting more or better service or value of quality of product compared to the one that is lesser in ranking than the one that you're considering. So looking at your digital concept comes up with these things, and you can dive at these on very granular levels with individual search when you get to the point that you're able to identify these unique one-on-one comparisons. Right now, we're not down to the one-on-one comparisons, but just saying that when you get down to the one-on-one comparisons, you can go on TripAdvisor and just pull up you and them and go, okay, what do they say about this place? Well, we're that, or oh, we're not that, or oh, yeah, I don't do that, or whatever. And you can really, truly evaluate from a SWOT perspective whether you can challenge them on things and come back to your operations team and go, guys, we have a goal. We want to improve our review scores by a half a point over the next 90 days. Depends on how many reviews you have and what you think is problematic that you can solve quickly or efficiently to create that kind of score. We need to dedicate ourselves to improving this, because if we do, there's a mathematical calculation of what that value improvement would be for you, both in ADR and occupancy. And you can show a dollar value. And this is where you can go back to ownerships and say, look, I need this much money to run these types of programs, but by so doing, we can make this much more money because of the increased ADR and occupancies that we're capable of getting, because we'll be able to capture more market demand. So going back to the larger scale discussion, sorry, that was a little bit of a down the rabbit hole on something. We are at a point where we've looked at how we show up online. We've looked at who else shows up for what we should show up for online. We've talked about how we compare to other places that are being under consideration for people that are looking at us in comparison to other places online, symbiotic markets. What do we do with now this exposure to this data? How do we begin to look at these things? Well, there's three categories of content that come out of all this. So three perspectives. What I'm doing better, what somebody else is doing better, and what everything is the same and I can't change. So with that, we need to look at two that we can influence. What I'm already doing better is pretty much there. We can talk about marketing strategy and optimization of that value later. We can talk about, we should definitely market that or advertise that or push that or highlight that. That's a strategy of marketing. We're still into the analysis and comp set. So we have to take the other two, which is what are we not doing as well and what are we doing about the same in those two. What we're not doing as well is the first next easiest thing to do, which is, okay, they're better. What are they better on? And we quantify that. That's when we start using other tools. And that is things like Topic Mojo, where we're looking for content. Sometimes what we're not doing better isn't represented in a competitor. Doesn't mean that our competitors are always doing better than us on something. It sometimes means that all of us aren't doing well on something. Like if you're near the biggest ball of twine, and you can tell I'm making these things up, but if you're near the biggest ball of twine and nobody in your market is talking about being near the biggest ball of twine, that wouldn't come up on how I compare myself to a competitor. That would come up on content discovery. And that goes back to one of my earlier conversations about content generation and then grading that content, is you need to take a larger look than just directly the business you're competing with. You need to look at all the mitigating factors of what people are making as decisions to coming to your market. What drives demand to your market? There's always been the old adage of you can't create demand. I defy that and say that you can if you discover content and or a purpose and reason that wasn't well known and then amplify it so that more people find it and discover it. You can create demand. That being aside, sometimes not knowing what you should talk about is the missing of demand. There's a demand there, but nobody's tapping it. It's like a underwater water line. Nobody knew it was there until you drove down and there you discover this whole new source of opportunity. So looking at what people look for in your market is the translation of this dialogue. And that comes from using platforms like Topic Mojo or Awario. And we'll talk about Awario in a different way as well, because that talks more about also research in a different component. But Topic Mojo is looking for what people are looking for. It's a discovery process. Now, you can use some free tools like Google Trends and so forth to see in general ways what people discover based on what you think you've learned from your analysis up to date. Like, okay, what do people look for downtown hotels Detroit? What do they say, downtown hotels Detroit, or hotels Detroit downtown, or hotels downtown Detroit? There's variations to everything, which is some people don't realize is just not a term. It's actually multiplicities, plurals, misspells, everything. These are categories, clusters, as we talked about last week, in the discovery process of how people search and find things. Well, the same methodology is used on trying to discover what people are trying to look for. Not everybody just looks for a hotel and uses the word a hotel or hotel in their search. Sometimes they're looking for the little statue of such and such. And from that, you show up because you're the closest hotel that optimized the content that we're the closest hotel to the little statue of such and such. Has nothing to do with that they were looking for you as a hotel. That's a tertiary value of them looking for a thing that they were interested in, that you were smart enough to know the content was there that you should put on your website so that you show up in the list of things as related to the fact if you're interested in this little statue or going to see it, we're right around the corner hotel. We're right there. Just there. You walk out, go see the little statue. That kind of thing. And we did that for Brussels, actually, from Monaco Beach. Is a way of making sure that your online competitive set, you're out distancing or outpacing yourself in comparison, because other hotels may not or not have the capacity really. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times when you're looking at making competitive set analysis with those in your market, is you find out very quickly that some competitors are literally stealing your ability or what you should be showing up for because you haven't. People have done to you what you're trying to do to them, which is, well, that's something that nobody's doing. It's a demand upon market, and nobody else is picking that up, even though the hotel that would be closer to it isn't. But I'm close enough. Let me say, if you're thinking about the little statue, stay at my hotel. I won't say I'm the closest, but I'm close, or how convenient it is, or how easy it is to get there. And that may be enough because nobody else is taking that lane of information. And it's because they added it to their site, they now are the hotel that get discovered when somebody's interested in going to see the little statue, compared to you who's right around the corner, but didn't. That's what we're doing when we're talking about digital marketing comp sets, is discovering these little veins of opportunity based on content, based on demand, based on potential market, and adding content associated with those things so that you can simply find, you may think that this is an undiscovered thing, put it up there, and in all honesty, it isn't. And this goes down to what's called long tail discovery. And if you've heard the term before, never understood, or if you didn't understand it, the idea of it is that the more general the discovery process, we go through a discovery education conversion process. It's a funnel for what people refer to. I don't like referring to it, but it's referred to as a funnel. Discovery is I want to take a vacation. You have no idea. That means anywhere in the world could be an option in this point, but nobody knows for sure. I just want to take a vacation. Then from there, it's like, oh, I want to take a vacation in the United States. Boom, geography gets in there. Oh, I want to go over and take a vacation for only about 3-5 days. Okay, quantifier as to what they're going to be doing. I want to not have to worry about anything while I'm there. Ooh, maybe it's an all-inclusive. See how this progression goes. Well, at each decision point, lesser people are following that path. Somebody else farther in that same process of, well, I want to go to Europe. Poof, the United States is off of it at that point. So it went from 100 people to 50 people just because they chose this side instead of that side. So as the volume of people diminish based on the granularity of their decision, the funnel gets smaller visually, and that turns into what's called long tail. Long tail is where people are looking for very precise, specific things in comparison to earlier in the funnel where they're looking for broader, general things. That's really the only transition point that makes the difference. So in the narrow, long tail version of all these things, it's not so much of whether I was going to go to Detroit or Michigan or United States or vacation as it is for all the other reasons. There is a motor museum in downtown Detroit that I just wanted to go see. I saw it on some news article. I thought it was interesting. What is it that I gave? What do they have? Oh, this has a lot of stuff I want to go see. It'd be kind of cool just to pop into Detroit and go see it. That, like I said, we don't know why people search for what they search for. We just have to make sure we're available for the discovery process that they use and how we compare against our comp set. So there might be a hotel right next to this museum, but they've never optimized the fact of their content on their website to be the hotel under consideration for those interested in this museum. Yet you, a farther point away, maybe more expensive or whatever, regardless, found the value in putting content about the museum on your website because of this discovery process we're talking about with comp set analysis, looking at these venues of interest. And this is where platforms like Topic Mojo and Awario as platforms come into play. Topic Mojo is a real cool platform because it allows you to basically say, if I were looking for this, what shows up? I mean, it's literally as simple as that. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm looking for cheeseburgers in Chicago. Oh, okay. Boom. Now there's tweets and news and forums and Pinterest and YouTube and Instagram and Reddits and Amazon and eBay and anything of any of all these platforms. It goes to all these platforms and says, hey, this is the information that I found. Here's videos of this stuff. Here's posts of this stuff. Here's this, that stuff, all the different places you can look at it. You can see the trends of when people are looking for this stuff. Like if I was looking for a Christmas market, I doubt very seriously I'm going to see a lot of traffic search for it in September, or excuse me, in summer. I will probably see a lot more of it come November, December, because that's when people are interested in that. So you see these trends, like I was talking about with Google Trends. Now you can start using tools like that to say, well, okay, if I use this term, it'll tell you geographically, this is who uses this term and at what time of year. And then you can look down into more regional and granular and everything else like this. It begins to give you a sense of if there is a value to pursuing that information. And that's the key element to this, is that you're looking to determine whether or not this has value in your comp analysis. If somebody, going back to an earlier part of our discussion, was looking for a vacation and they're comparing the proposition of going to Aspen, Colorado versus going to Key West, Florida, I don't know what the decision process of that is, whether they have family at that point, whether they have the income to justify it. We would hope to think that they, by the choice of them comparing it, maybe they're just trying to decide if they could afford it. Whatever it is, we don't know. We just know we're at the one juxtaposition in the road of, do I take a left with Aspen or take a right with Key West? Okay. And that doesn't even guarantee we keep them on a path, because they might then compare us to the Caribbean or some other place that maybe they want to go to the Pacific for all we know. Because again, we don't know the other criteria of their financial capabilities, their family requirements, the time away, what they're looking for in particular that drives that interest. We don't know. But we do know that we're at this moment, we're comparing ourselves between this and Aspen. That's a symbiotic market in an online digital comp set. So we have to make sure that we have content that applies to that point of decision. Now, we don't mean to make encyclopedia valued content all over our website and just scatterbrain everything and shotgun everything. That's what you see a lot of times when you see people do what things to do in our market, and you have 50 things that are all static and it's like a needle in a haystack, because you don't know what drove them to that page. There's 50 things there. What is it that they drove? That's where attribution modeling and strings come in and so forth. And that's another discussion for us another time. But so we're at this comp set comparison of how do we compare at this point in the funnel between us and the symbiotic market that we're being compared against. And we might be compared to other things like, well, I want to do Midwest hay bale rides, or I want to do Texas ranch. We don't know. So we have to become the authority on what we represent in a way that represents us accurately, truthfully, but also, most important, completely. And what we can do in this process at this point, keeping with the comparison of Aspen, Colorado, is talk about the warm weather, the balmy breezes, the related and relaxing, or the fun nightlife, or whatever we know is truthfully accurate about what we represent in context. And that way we can play to what it is and why we're under consideration, because that's what people will look at and say, okay, or I'm talking about hot cocoa around a fire pit overlooking a valley, or sliding down the hill in snow or whatever. We'll let them fairly and accurately judge us against it. But here's where we get the value of what we're talking about. We can see in our traffic, if accurately done, how we are being judged by how much traffic we lose. In analytics, you have funnels that show this is where the traffic first came in. This is where they went. This is where they went in your website. And if we see them going to content that we have specifically designed for these types of comparisons, we can see what the potential value of what we're doing is compared to having not done it. It's an on-off switch. We can also see how well we fared in the capture of it based on the historical ups and downs of traffic that it creates. Because once we begin to see our own results of the traffic impact, the content impact, and we compare that to the general trends that people use, we can say, wow, we're getting a larger voice about this content than we did before we did this content. And more importantly, we're seeing the metrics of more conversions at this time of year when people are considering us compared to these other markets. So we are on the right path of sharing content against a comp set that we are compared to online that isn't about our brick and mortar in our city. So all of these things have the metrics. If we know that we are at times of year in comparison to these symbiotic markets, and we create ad campaigns that augment our organic placement of content, we can see the metrics of impact, obviously, one, by the proper tracking of all of our ad campaigns and the traffic associated with them, but also the revenue being generated from. Because if we're offering the packages from our feedback from our guests, they come and say, man, I was thinking about going to mountains, but I'm so glad I came with you guys over in Key West and so forth. Great. Take that information and put it into your market strategy to augment for everyone else that didn't make the same decision that those that showed up at your door did, and see if you can expand your voice and market for that. What I found when going back to my analogy between when I was running Key West properties compared to Aspen was they spent a substantive amount of money prior to in the lead time associated with larger key events that were happening in Key West that would drive interest to my market instead of theirs. So they were smart enough to be able to go farther into the funnel, back in the discovery education phases, and say, how cool is it to go to the mountains right about now? This is the coolest thing to do. This way, why go over and sweat? Why do all these things that drove people to be already thinking more about going to them than to us? So by the time that the real feature of what we would be as a driver for our market was highlighted, they were already into the strong consideration phase going to them. That's the true value composition of comp sets, is finding out where in your place you can divert your share, their share of business, to you being your share of business. Going to the old STAR report, and I would say an old STAR report is still current, everybody uses it and so forth. Well, I tend to like OTA Insights these days. When you're looking at this, you have what's called market share. And market share is roughly calculated on the fact that you have X number of room inventory compared to total room inventory to your market. So you have market share. What you should get for your occupancy is your market share. At 100%, that means you're getting your fair share. Anything above 100% means you're taking somebody else's fair share. Anything less than 100%, somebody took your fair share. Simple enough. It's called tab 4 for those that have been in the industry for a while. It's like the first thing you looked at before you ran into a report, a meeting when you had to go over the report is like, what's tab 4 say? What's our fair share? What's our RevPAR index compared to our and to market, and also our ADR and occupancies? It was the numbers that you were either going to get beaten up for or praised for. Well, praise is a rough one. Weren't beat up for. Anyway, so taking market share is the preeminent reason why you do comp set, because you need to find out what your competitors are showing up for. Digital comp set addresses the symbiotic markets, but then also it goes into the next step and is how do you compare yourself to those in your market that you're being compared against via online. And a lot of times, and if you ever wonder how this all works, plan a trip that you to a place you've never been and see how you discover it. There was always a question: do people look for how to get there first versus where they stay versus what they're going to do first? And the answer is yes. Every one of those is a key catalyst to somebody's interest in discovery. Sometimes it can be the discovery of the fact that there's the biggest ball of twine. Other times it can be that you're by staying there, they always want to visit there, and they're just looking where they want to stay that's closest to what they're most interested in, and you're the first consideration. The other is that they saw a flight special and or they saw that it was easy to get there, and they always wanted to go there, and then they figure out where they're going to stay afterwards and then what they're going to do after that. All three are equally shared in their drive. They change as to the priority, because sometimes, like for instance, in season for Florida, you first look at, is it something I can get down to? Is there any flights? I mean, Thanksgiving, great example. You know where you want to go. That's not the question. You know where you can stay. Not really the question. The question is, can I get there? Can I get a flight? Can I afford the flight that I can get to get to where I want to go? Versus, say, during summertime, it's a matter of, is there a place for me to stay if I get there? Because I know that where I'm going to is in high demand. Is there even rooms available to go there? Think of it like Super Bowl even. It's like, okay, I want to go see the Super Bowl. Is there even a hotel I can stay at? So each has its prioritization in the discovery education, acquisition process. Comp sets are, in the general terms, how do you know when you need to show up for what other people are going to be, or other businesses are going to be compared to you. So in these tools like SERPstat, where you're evaluating first what you show up for and how then others show up for it also, to things like Hsmai as to how much are they spending to show up for what they're showing for. Because remember, we've only been talking really about organic and organic content and relevancy and authentication and voice based on your organic value. The amplifier to that, like an electric guitar is, and an amp to is to an electric guitar. Electric guitar sounds terrible unless it's plugged in. Social and paid are your amplifiers to your organics guitar. How's that for metaphor today? Having the monies to feature what you're trying to promote about yourself accurately is the real catalyst driver to getting the conversions you need for the revenue you should be getting in your fair share. What I mean by that, maybe you are the closest hotel to that little statue. You have optimized your content to make sure people have that information available to you on your website. And you've optimized yourself so that under organic search, you would show up well for that discovery. However, in the real world of digital marketing digital world that we live in, above that organic result that you have so meticulously worked for is everybody else that shows up for relevancy associated with the statue and the fact that they have other information about that, the TripAdvisors, Expedias, and so forth of the world. Above that, you have everybody that's paying for that opportunity to be considered for the fact that they have an offer and or value to what they are being searched for about the little statue and coming to visit it. And above all that is the larger section of what Google says all about that, and how they're offering a map and all the other options for you and all the information. And more importantly, that wonderful little answer box that now gets over 64% of all traffic that doesn't go anywhere below it on answering the question, where should I stay when I want to go see the little statue? And that's the things you're fighting against. And the only way that you can combat two of those things is paid advertisements so that you show up even above your own organic listings. And you only decide those spends knowing that there's a value proposition on the amount of audience that you garner from that and the conversion potential of it. But also, and this goes to the fact that it's kind of like a trump on top of a trump card. And that is, I don't even like using that term, ace on top of an ace. How's that? Is the answer box. If you can create a very good core relevancy of accuracy of information to the point that Google uses your content to answer a specific question about the little statue and where to stay, and they use you've trumped the paid space, you've trumped all the organic traffic above you, and they've driven them right to your website about what you're saying is the most relevant in Google's mind answer to the query that the guest used. That's a real huge element in how comp set analysis can work for you, because you wouldn't know to create that content if you didn't know there was value to that content in its discovery. And that's the true value of developing comp set analysis, content awareness, content clustering, keyword analysis, content campaigning, and then its relevancy to exactly what people are looking for by listening to them, by using things like a Wario and other places that say, this is what people are looking for. This is what they're talking about. This is how they're trying to discover these things. And if you can provide that answer and that information, you're going to get rewarded by being the answer to that question. And that's where comp set improvement comes in, is doing exactly those things. So that is how to create, in general terms, a digital comp set strategy for your hotel. Several different tools to use, anything from, like I said, a Wario, Hsmai, Topic Mojo to SERPstat. There's a variety of other tools that I use as well. Those are the highlights to our discussion topic today. I thank everyone for their time and listening to my sometimes rabbit hole tangent conversations, but hopefully it was helpful and inspiring to think about variations of what you might already be doing. So I hope that is helpful and beneficial to you in that sense. From a news perspective, I wanted to put something a little added to our show, since that's me talking today. And that is a little bit of a personal perspective and also a little bit of newsworthy consideration. We just recently had a flurry of industry events that happened at the tail end of September. High Tech, HFTP's annual huge hospitality technology forum. I've been to it for 20 years. One of the first years I've not gone to. It was in Dallas, and personal reasons, this, that, and the other thing, but not because of lack of anything other than just it didn't happen to work out this year. Also with it, always conjoined in recent years is HSMAI's ROC conference, Revenue Optimization Conference. And they did include also, because they had to miss it the past year, the Hospitality Marketing Board's Hospitality Marketing Strategy Conference. So it was a kind of a cluster of several of them. And the week prior to that was the Lodging Conference, and before that was the CBB Conference and so forth. So a lot of very large conferences about our industry. I'm very happy. From what I understand, the attendances were up to expectations. Limited, of course. I think they're roughly around 50% of what they normally historically gotten prior to COVID's pandemic, but still large and substantive and worth off for everyone to be there. And I also understand a lot of people found the value, as much as the content was there, more in the networking and the ability to see people one-on-one and face-to-face, given the exclusion of that opportunity for so long because of the pandemic. I do want to bring out from a personal perspective of this. I applaud. I'm forever the optimist and forever the possibilities person. I'm always the one that says, what could we do with this? Or what possibility is there existed? So I'm always on the optimistic side of this. But I also want to keep a pragmatic reality as to some things. Our industry is very fixated on basically keeping in chorus about the growth or the expansion of our industry or the resurgence of our industry, the rebirth of our industry, the retooling of our industry, the remodeling of our industry, all this positive value proposition, what our industry is growing into. Pragmatically, we have to fix some of the things that we have historically done in order for those optimisms to be realized. We need to recreate our technology. We need to recreate our dependency on certain lines of labor and support to more efficiently cater to the consumer-centric aspect of our industry. I feel in many ways our industry has become very much about a investment perspective, business perspective, which it justifiably, business is business. But at the core of our industry is a hospitality service, providing service. We've had representations of how that is measured through consumer sentiment websites and rankings and things like this. We've seen that influence things we just talked about today about relevancy as to how we are discovered for what we are as a business based on how people perceive us in the reviews. We know it influences what we do, but we don't often highlight that as a process necessary for all this rebirth that we're talking about in our industry. We need to be very centric on what our industry truly does as a service, and that is truly is a service to our guests, not whether or not always it's a numbers crunching value proposition to do so. There needs to be a lot of, I think, revisions to our methodology and our focuses for us to truly succeed at what we are selling ourselves as. We're back in business and travel is coming back and so forth. Yes, travel is in essence a part of our humanity. We will always and should always discover travel. And for that reason, hospitality is a key component of that, because even with the RV surge, you still need a place to have to park your RV, and that requires hospitality. So to my end, I say, as we evaluate our growth and rebirth and regrowth and anything else that we want to coin the phrase of, and all the articles and discussions and presentation headlines and webinars that seem to be touting around, that we're coming back and so forth, is the real reality that there is some changes that have to happen to our industry for those goals to be truly realized. Am I blinded by the fact that that's all going to happen? No, that's not the reality. The reality of it is we'll get some of those things done, but the hope is that we do get some of the important things done. So with that, thank you everyone for your time today. As a reminder to everyone, we always do simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. We also, on our TV channel, always Hospitality Channel, which you can find on your Roku, Amazon Prime, Google Play, on our Apple TV. We do that. The live show is always on the free side of that. And you just simply go to any of those platforms that you have, look for the Hospitality Channel. You'll find it. Subscribe to it. You don't have to pay. There's a paid subside to it. We certainly will welcome you to do that. We're going to be adding perpetually more and more content. It's an industry-driven channel. Exposing you to products and services, in addition to trainings and learnings, plus also exposure to stories and things about our industry to hopefully inspire you to find different ways of doing the things that you enjoy doing in hospitality. So that's our TV channel, but you always get to watch the channel for free when we do the live show. We also have our podcast, which we do each week. I'll be doing a recap of this show in addition to additional tools and functions that we don't talk about on the show here. We will be back again, as always, next Friday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern U.S. time, live. Prior to that, we will re-simulcast this show on different time zones globally, because we have 39 countries we go to, over 25,000 weekly subscribers and viewers. We will be doing this, as always, Wednesday morning, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australia time, and 11:30 a.m. London time, so that we get our EU and APAC friends a little more familiar time, even though, as always, a privilege for watching the simulcast for our people from a variety of countries do watch us. And thank you all very much for watching us at some very odd hours in your time zones, but I appreciate that. So once again, my name is Lauren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and look forward to talking to you all next week.